both.
Hello there.
As I was going through that list then, Nick, you sighed when I talked about some of the dates and some of the pointers during your time over there. When you start to look back, obviously it's a massive relief, but how do you analyse, how did you get through?
Just have to, think of my family. My mum was the most focal point for me, keeping strong, and my sister wouldn't allow it. I had to do it for myself, but more importantly, I had to do it for my family.
Tell us what it was like for the family. I mean, did you manage to communicate with them? How much were you in touch? Did you know what was going on?
Communication was all written. We weren't allowed any telephone calls.
Right.
They were allowed to call Indian numbers, so they were allowed to call their legal team and any Indian friends that they had out there, but that's where it stopped. So obviously you can imagine the time that it took for letters and updates to be given to the men was quite a long time, and I think that was the hardest part of it, having that lack of constant immediate communication. Certainly for us as a family, that was one of the hardest things. We didn't know when Nick was down at his lowest point, so we couldn't therefore pick him up. So
what were your low points, Nick?
Finding out that my mum's aneurysm happened back in 2013 whilst in prison. Obviously I'm going through a situation that is still up in the air, and then I get told my mum's nearly died. So that was one of my main low points. The second time, that was just basically being charged and sentenced to 5 years. So initially I was low, but I had to accept that I'm in prison. There's nothing I can do but let my legal team get me out of prison. So I had to basically dig deep and keep going till the final hurdle. And that was just recently when I got released. Take
us back to what first happened. You guys were on a ship, weren't you? You had weapons with you. You had permits for those weapons. Initially they were accepted, but then they weren't. And you were looking to the British government to say, actually, yeah, of course, this is completely legal. What on earth is going on? What happened?
On the vessel that I was on, the Seaman Ohio, it was like a holding ship for people who have initially done their job and come off, hand the weapons in, and basically rest till the next job. Basically, we're just having to do what we need to do whilst on that vessel, and it was just basically just being a passenger mostly. There was nothing really to it.
The authorities got on board?
Yes, they came on board. I woke up to find that we were heading towards Tuticorin port. Once we got there, it was pre-planned. There was a massive welcome committee. Something was not right. I believe it was a seizure exercise by the Indian authorities. This isn't like, oh, well, we've got a suspicious vessel, we'll bring it into port and find out what's going on. This was a planned exercise, and that was the start of a 4-year hell.
Then what happened?
Whilst in port, I wasn't really involved in anything. I was told basically to keep out the way, and we just were kind of briefly told, just keep out the way, and if you need to give your passport in. And after a few days, we thought, I'll be okay. After a few days, the weapons were all removed. And then on the 18th of October, they physically told us we are going to a hospital. We didn't go to a hospital, we went to the police station. And then that was it. I knew I'm going to prison.
How did they treat you?
It was sign this, sign this, sign this. It was blank pieces of paper. Nothing was in English, nothing was really explained. It was madness, absolute madness.
And then what happened?
We then, after a long process in the police station, went to the local court. It was dark, it was closed, so we went around the back. Someone appeared, said a few things, went on the back of the bus, and then that was it. Off to Chennai Central Prison 1.
What was the prison conditions like for you?
They were quite horrible at first, being in a strange situation again after a year and a half.
Were you in a cell on your own? Or?
We initially came to Central Prison 1 as a 23 foreign group. We were all put in one cell. As you can imagine, that's quite cramped. The prison did give us an alternate cell, and so a few of the British moved into that. And then later on, the Estonians, they then split up and got another cell. So we kind of were split up, but still in the same compound.
And how were you feeling? I mean, what was going through your mind? Did you know what was going to happen next? Were you able to speak to the family?
I was able to speak to my family via letters, like my sister explained.
But that was all the way through? You could always communicate with them?
Yeah, I could always communicate.
Conditions were terrible, though, weren't they?
Well, they were mainly when it was down to the weather. When it was the summer, it was really, really horrible with the heat. The power, I don't know if it was just general India lack of infrastructure, or they just decided to switch the power off all day. But if you can imagine being in 40-degree heat with no fans, sweating, getting nauseated, it's not a real good feeling. Very, very difficult and horrible conditions.
You were released, weren't you, for a certain length of time, and you thought that you could come home, but you didn't have a passport. What was going on there?
We got bail in April 2014. Case was then quashed in July 2014. We should have been handed our passports back by the Indian court, and therefore to be allowed to leave. Yes, the quash was partially, but that was the captain and crew charges still involved. My charges were non-existent. I should have came home, but it wasn't to be.
Why not?
The Indian authorities just disregarded their own law.
What were the British authorities doing at this time, Lisa, to get your brother home?
At this time, I strongly believe that the British government were not engaged in our situation. Obviously, we had contact with them, but they certainly weren't engaged as they should have been. We were continually telling the British government it is at this point, with no charges, that they should have brought the men home. They should have submitted all of the paperwork in order for the men to leave India. We were told by the legal team that the men are free to leave India. However, the British government said, let's just wait and see if the Indians appeal. Let's just wait and see. So we had to wait for 3 months as per Indian law, and on the 89th day of the 90-day period, the Indians lodged an appeal, which is what we had been continually telling the British government. That's what's going to happen. You need to get the men out of the country first.
And then you went back to jail?
Well, it went up to Supreme Court, and things were up in air in Supreme Court, which initially didn't go too well for us because it gave the Indian authorities a chance to think, well, what is going on here? We need to know. So therefore they initiated a trial. We told the British government week 1, day 1, if we go to trial, it'll be in Tuticorin. They will send us to prison. That is what the lower courts do. It's for the higher courts, i.e. the High Court and the Supreme Court, to rectify their problems. So when we're having a trial in 2015, it was coming to Christmas, things looked good. You know, I honestly believed we could have won and gone home, but the judge just disregarded everything and sent us to 5 years of prison. And we were kind of flabbergasted as to what...
Take me back to that moment when he did that, when the judge did that. I'm guessing it was a man. How did you feel?
I think because of the language barrier that was happening in the court, we had to ask our legal team what's been said, because one of the judge's assistants shouted something, and we're like, what? And our legal team says, you've been sentenced to 5 years of weapons charges, and we're like, yeah, you're joking? absolutely joking? And I just was took over with emotion. I thought, I need to ring my family. It's not real. This can't be real. I'm supposed to be going home. Horrible feeling. Absolutely horrible. But what's done is done, I'm afraid. Got to think of the future.
So, you went back to jail. Horrible conditions that you were in. You were telling us about the heat and the challenges that you were facing, especially in the summertime. Obviously, the family never stopped campaigning for you. When did you realise there was that hope, that little nugget of hope that you would be released?
Well, it's not too long ago. With the British government having a meeting with the Chief Justice of Tamil Nadu, and then we had the Foreign Minister, Mark Field, come out to see us. After that, we got wind that that's it. It's back on. They're going to do a refresher of the appeal. Not a full appeal, but just to get the judge back to where he was in November. And the days started going by where we had our court appearance by the legal team, and then they were informing us whilst we were in prison that it's been going well, it's going well, it's going well. And then 27th of November we were told that's it, that's decision date, and it was a great feeling to know this is going to be out of Tamil Nadu one way or the other. And after that moment I just was overwhelmed with a mixed emotion. Are we going to go back to Supreme Court, or am I going to go home?
We're going to be hearing from the Prime Minister very shortly. She's going to be standing up in the House of Commons. Do you feel that she did enough to help you?
I think she did what she had to do, but it was the Chennai department doing their duty down in Tamil Nadu that made the difference. You could talk and talk and talk in New Delhi. It had to be done in Tamil Nadu. That's where we were.
Do you think they did enough?
No, certainly not up until the last stages. My brother was in prison innocently, stuck in India for up to for over 4 years. No, I don't think the British government did enough. They weren't engaged quick enough. However, when they realised, because allegedly they were shocked at the conviction, and I think once they realised how serious it was, then I think they started to become a little bit more engaged. But that certainly wasn't until the latter part of this. The men have lost so much of their lives through lack of engagement with the Foreign Office, and I'll always maintain that they should have and could have done a lot more for these men.
What are you going to do now?
That's a really tough question, to be honest. I think it's family time.
Enjoy Christmas. First one in ages.
4 Christmases rolled into one. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Being home after so long, spending time with my mum. Absolutely can't wait.
Your mum, who you said won't let you out your sight.
She won't. She absolutely won't let me out of sight.
It was a struggle getting him here today.
It was a struggle. I'm glad you did. But new year, new start, fresh start. Not sure what to do yet. Just see how we go.
Just taking each day as it comes, and hopefully this next 4 years is 4 years to remember.